February 6th, 2026. I mean, that's a date that I think is going to be taught in economics classes for, what, the next 100 years?
Oh, absolutely. But not as a triumph. It's a crime scene.
A crime scene where the weapon was just a keyboard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene. We're looking at an event that happened at 7:10 p.m. on Bithumb, a major crypto exchange. The plan was, almost enough, a standard marketing event.
Right. They just wanted to give out some rewards.
Yeah, between 2,000 and 50,000 Korean won to some users. A simple database entry. Give user X this much won. Simple.
But then you get the typo heard around the world.
Right. A single input error. The admin mistakes the unit KRW for Bitcoin. So instead of sending, say, 2,001, which is like $1.50,
Yeah.
the system sends at least 2,000 Bitcoin
Per person.
to 695 users.
Let's pause on that for a second. The gravity of that. This isn't a rounding error.
No.
We're talking about 620,000 Bitcoin. That's something like 3% of the entire global Bitcoin supply. And the value at the time, we're looking at over 60 trillion Korean won.
60 trillion.
No.
Just created out of nothing in a split second.
And here's the kicker. For the next 20 minutes, until the exchange finally caught on at 7:20 p.m., that money was real on their screens.
Can you imagine? Some people probably fainted. Some people definitely tried to sell.
They did. And the internal price on Bithumb crashed 17% almost instantly because suddenly the supply had just exploded.
And that right there is why we're doing this deep dive. This isn't some funny whoops moment. It's not a tech anecdote. This Bithumb incident is a death sentence for the credibility of modern finance.
It really is.
It exposes the fundamental lie that we've all been living under, that the number you see on your screen is the money in the vault. It proves centralized ledgers can create ghost money.
It's terrifying when you actually think about it. If this happened on the actual Bitcoin blockchain, you know, the one running on proof of work, this transaction would be physically impossible, right?
Impossible. Physics itself would forbid it. On the blockchain, you can't send 620,000 Bitcoin unless you actually have the keys to 620,000 Bitcoin.
The network would just reject it.
Instantly, yeah. You can't create unmined Bitcoin. But on some exchange's private database, all it takes is a keystroke. That's the difference between administrative authority and mathematical proof.
On the blockchain, math is the governor. On an exchange, it might be a tired guy named Steve.
Exactly.
So let's unpack this timeline, because the failure itself is just as scary. 7:00 p.m., the ghost money goes out. It takes 20 minutes, a full 20 minutes for anyone inside to notice.
20 minutes.
Then another 15 minutes to suspend all trading. So you have a 35-minute window where reality was just completely broken.
And in that window, the market reacted. The price tanked because the whole system was flooded with an illusion.
Yeah.
And this brings us to, I think, the core metaphor we need to talk about.
The game of musical chairs.
Modern finance is a game of musical chairs.
And everyone's dancing, totally confident that there's a seat waiting for them.
Right. We all operate on this collective belief that the numbers on the screen correspond one-to-one with actual assets. But Bithumb just showed us the music can stop, and suddenly you find out there were never any chairs to begin with.
It reminds me so much of the FTX collapse in 2022, but it's a different flavor of disaster.
It is.
With FTX, that was intentional. That was deception. Sam Bankman-Fried used a literal code backdoor to siphon customer
funds. Straight to Alameda Research, using his own printed FTT tokens as collateral. That was pure malice.
Yeah, FTX was malice. Bithumb was, well, incompetence.
But here's the question for you listening. If you're the one who loses your life savings, do you really care if it was malice or incompetence?
Not one bit. The result is the same. 0 is 0.
Precisely. Whether it's a corrupt CEO stealing your money or a tired employee hitting the wrong key, the vulnerability is exactly the same. Centralized ledgers rely on trust in humans.
And humans are always a single point of failure.
Greedy or just clumsy, yeah.
It just hammers home the fragility of this whole centralized matrix. In both cases, you have non-existent assets being created. FTX had its FTT tokens, which were basically vapor. Bithumb had accidental Bitcoin that didn't exist on the real chain.
And look at the fallout. For FTX, the music stopped. Withdrawals surge, a classic bank run. And the void between the numbers on the screen and the assets in the vault was revealed.
Customers got nothing.
With Bithumb, they got lucky. They recovered 99.7% of the coins. but only by freezing everyone's accounts and using their own assets to clean up the mess.
So it wasn't a systemic guarantee, it was a frantic, authoritarian cleanup operation.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the modern centralized exchange is basically a house of cards. But you've brought some research today that suggests this isn't a new problem. You're calling it the 5,000-year war.
That's right. We tend to think of all this as brand new, cutting-edge tech. But the struggle for an immutable ledger, a record of value that can't be corrupted by kings or bankers or clumsy admins, that's as old as civilization itself. We've identified what we call the 21 guardians throughout history, who are all fighting this war, and in doing so, they paved the way for Bitcoin.
Let's go deep on this, because we always hear blockchain is new. You're saying the problem it solves is ancient. Who are we starting with?
We have to go way back to ancient Babylon, to Hammurabi.
Hammurabi, the eye for an eye guy. What's he got to do with crypto?
Well, his real contribution to finance was mandating written records for trade. He's basically the ancestor of on-chain records. He required that if you claim a transaction happened, it has to be carved in stone or clay.
Publicly verifiable.
Exactly. If Hammurabi ran Bithumb, the error would have been impossible. He was trying to stop the he said, she said of finance.
Wow. So the desire for a public ledger is literally ancient. Okay, who else?
Let's move to Athens.
Yeah.
A guy named Solon. Now, Solon is fascinating because he had to deal with something called Sisaktheia.
Sisaktheia sounds like a disease.
It pretty much means shaking off of burdens. Athens was bankrupt because of unmanageable debt. The ledger was broken. Solon had to perform a hard reset. He just canceled the debts.
That sounds disturbingly familiar, like a modern central bank bailout. Oops, we messed up the math, so we're just hitting delete.
It's the exact same principle. Solon was the first central banker facing a liquidity crisis. And when your ledger relies on human authority, the solution to bad math is always to break the promise.
Bitcoin, with its hard cap of 21 million, is the opposite of that. It's a promise that can't be broken.
It is the solution Solon was looking for, an equilibrium that needs no artificial resets.
Okay, so I'm seeing the pattern. It's all about trust. Who else was working on this trust problem?
Croesus, king of Lydia. We know him for the first gold coins. But his real innovation was purity verification. He was the first person to say, don't just trust me that this is gold. Verify it.
So he was the original don't trust, verify guy.
He was running the first node. That 620,000 BTC on Bithumb was fake supply. It had unverified purity. Croesus gave us the standard, and running a Bitcoin node today is just the modern version of that. You're checking the purity of the ledger yourself.
It is fascinating how these ancient figures were wrestling with the same issues. But let's get into the mechanics of value. You mentioned Ibn Khaldun. I know him for sociology, not economics.
He's crucial. He was one of the first to argue that value comes from labor, from energy. You can't just create value out of thin air. You have to do work.
Which is the polar opposite of the Bithumb glitch.
Right. Bithumb created 60 trillion, one with zero energy. A keystroke. Ibn Khaldun would call that fake. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is proof of work. You have to burn real-world energy to mine a block.
It anchors the value in physical reality.
It's the bridge between the digital world and the laws of thermodynamics. Bithumb was proof of keystroke. Bitcoin is proof of work.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now, I want to get to the math. The outline mentions Copernicus. I know him for, the solar system. He did economics.
He did. He laid out the mathematical foundation for inflation before economics was even a formal field. He basically formulated the equation MV equals PYY.
Okay, hold on. Break that down for us. MV equals PYY.
It's the quantity theory of money. Wonder if the money supply has how fast money moves past the price level. And this is all the stuff you can buy. Copernicus basically said if you crank up the money supply, money dollar, without creating more stuff, then prices have to go up. It's a law of math.
And Bithumb proved that law in 20 minutes.
A perfect real-time validation of a 500-year-old equation. They massively increased dollars in their exchange, and the price crashed instantly.
Speaking of who benefits, Richard Cantillon.
Ah, the Cantillon effect. So important. Cantillon noticed that when new money is created, it doesn't spread out evenly. The people closest to the money printer get it first.
And they get to spend it at the old, low prices.
Exactly. So in the Bithumb case, those 695 users were the Cantillon insiders. They got the new money first. If they'd managed to sell, they would have literally transferred wealth from everyone else on the exchange to themselves.
It really feels like every great thinker in history warned us about this. We skipped Isaac Newton. He was master of the mint, wasn't he?
He was, and he applied scientific precision to the gold standard. He wanted it based on physics, not a king's decree. He hunted counterfeiters himself.
So Satoshi inherits that same rigor, but with cryptography instead of physics.
That's the lineage. Hammurabi, Newton, Jefferson, who warned us banks are more dangerous than standing armies. It all leads to Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi is the final guardian.
The one who finally solved it.
He solved the double spending problem.
Yeah.
He solved the trust problem. He created a system where you don't need to trust a CEO or a clumsy admin. You just trust the code.
Which brings us to survival. We have this immutable ledger, Bitcoin, and then we have these fragile exchange ledgers. You mentioned the Lindy effect. What does that mean here?
The Lindy effect basically says that for non-perishable things, like an idea or a technology, the longer it has already survived, the longer its future life expectancy is.
So a chair has existed for thousands of years. It'll probably exist for thousands more.
Right. Now apply that to Bitcoin. It's been running for over 15 years. It's survived hacking attempts, government bans, internal wars. Every single day that it keeps running, its probability of future survival actually increases. It's anti-fragile.
Now contrast that with a centralized exchange.
Exchanges do not benefit from the Lindy effect. They're fragile. As an exchange gets older, it doesn't get stronger. It accumulates complexity, legal risk, what we call moral hazard. The longer it exists, the probability of a catastrophic failure like Bithumb or FTX actually goes up.
That is a terrifying thought. The longer I leave my assets on an exchange, the more likely it is to vanish.
Statistically, yes. Look, Bitcoin has volatility. The price goes up and down. But exchanges have ruin risk. Ruin is a one-way trip to zero.
Which brings us to the strategic ultimatum, the core mandate from this deep dive. Numbers you cannot withdraw are not wealth.
It is the absolute, undeniable truth. Think about Bithumb again. For those 35 minutes and during the freeze, users lost total control.
And with FTX, people saw billions on their screens. They felt rich. But the withdraw button was grayed out.
And that is the moment of truth. An exchange ledger is just an IOU, a debt certificate. It says, we owe you this asset. It is not the asset itself. Until you move it to a wallet where you, and only you, hold the private keys, you don't own Bitcoin. You own a promise from a company that might make a typo tomorrow.
Or a company that might be run by a fraud.
Exactly. The solution is self-custody. It is the only shield. On the Bitcoin network, a CEO cannot change the code to steal your funds. A typo can't create 60 trillion won.
It's a full transition from centralized trust, which is just hoping humans behave, to distributed trust, which is based on math and physics.
And this is why the asset move is a strategic imperative. It isn't just about buying Bitcoin. It is about holding it correctly.
Yeah.
If you buy Bitcoin and leave it on an exchange, you haven't finished the move. You've just swapped one form of risk for another.
So, for everyone listening, here's the bottom line. The Bithumb incident, FTX. These were warning shots. They are the last screams of an archaic financial system trying and failing to manage a new type of asset.
The 5,000-year war for an immutable ledger is over. We won. The technology exists, but you have to actually choose to use it. You have a choice between the fake ledger of centralization or the immutable ledger of the 21 guardians.
The strategy couldn't be simpler.
Yeah.
Self-custody, get your assets off the exchanges. Don't be the one left standing when the music stops next time.
Because adopting this isn't just an investment strategy. It's the completion of a 5,000-year human dream for a record that cannot be corrupted. The wait is finally over.
Don't trust.
Verify.
That's all for this deep dive. We'll see you on the chain.